Hello, my name is Edmond Gubbins. I'm a PhD researcher in Mary Immaculate College in Limerick in the Republic of Ireland. As a musician and primary teacher myself, music has always been a keen area of interest for me in my career, and I'm delighted to share with you some of the findings arising from my ongoing doctoral research into the use of informal and non-formal approaches in music teaching and learning within the Irish primary school context. Teachers and students who have been using the Musical Futures approach for the first term of this academic year shared their perspectives on music teaching and learning within this project, and I'll condense these experiences in this video. At this point, I would like to acknowledge that my research has been supported and funded by the Irish Research Council, Mary Immaculate College, and the Irish National Teachers Organisation, and would like to thank them for this support and funding during my doctoral journey. I also wish to acknowledge the support of my supervisor, Dr Gwen Moore, and the support of the Musical Futures UK team throughout the project. Initial immersion in the literature has found several problems in primary music education within the Irish context. Music education in the primary school is most often delivered by the class teacher. This generalist model relies heavily on the teacher's musical knowledge, background, and experience. As such, the interrelated areas of teacher efficacy and knowledge impact the musical engagement of students, with many teachers reporting a lack of content knowledge and confidence in their ability to teach music, particularly if they do not consider themselves to be musical. This is compounded by the apparent discord between the objectives of the primary music curriculum and the manifestation of teacher practice. Within the whole school, the implementation of music education is dependent on the vision for music of the in-school management team, led by the principal, which can cause considerable variance in how music education is delivered from teacher to teacher and from school to school. Both of these areas are also influenced and mediated through the beliefs and values of teachers with regard to musical ability and musicality, which simultaneously shape and are shaped by ideology at a systemic level. It is through a combination of the issues above that I believe there may be inconsistent practice among generalist teachers with regard to music education. Thus, it is one of the aims of my thesis to examine ways in which these inconsistencies may be addressed. Informal and non-formal learning pedagogies, such as the Musical Futures approach, may offer a potential means of realising this, and so my overarching research question is: to what extent can non-formal teaching and learning in music education using the Musical Futures pedagogical approach affect beliefs about music education and musical ability within the context of generalist primary teacher practice? I have further broken down my research question into distinct but overlapping embedded questions, namely, what are the musical experiences and prior music education of generalist primary teachers? How do these musical experiences and prior music education influence teacher beliefs about music education and musical ability within the context of their practice? To what extent are teacher beliefs and practice influenced by ideologies of musical value and ability? To what extent can non-formal teaching and learning pedagogies using Musical Futures approaches facilitate changes in teacher beliefs and practice? And finally, to what extent can non-formal teaching and learning pedagogies using Musical Futures approaches enhance music learning and pupil engagement in the primary classroom? It is my hope in this project to document primary teachers' musical backgrounds and prior music learning and teaching experiences and situate it within current discourse in the field. I also wish to interrogate assumptions of musical value and the social reproduction of musical opportunity within primary music education. I wish to do all of this while proffering new perspectives on the ways in which the reproduction of music education practices and critical pedagogy as intervention influences beliefs about musicality and musical ability for primary school communities, through enhancing the quality of music education provision at the primary level for the generalist teacher using participatory action research as the methodological approach. The potential for the adaptation of the Musical Futures approach within the Irish primary classroom is significant. The primary music curriculum is divided into three strands of listening and responding, performing, and composing. These strands are further divided into strand units, as you can see here. Underpinning all of the strands and strand units are the musical elements. As an example, from my observations, teachers who have used the chair drumming resource as a jumping off point have facilitated student exploration of pulse, tempo, and dynamics. Generalist teachers have relative freedom to address these strands and elements during the school year, depending on the needs and interests of their students. The curriculum itself is built in a spiral design, whereby as the child progresses through the primary school, they return to each strand and element of the curriculum and explore it in increasing depth and complexity. Indeed, the overarching aims of the primary curriculum resonate largely with those of the Musical Futures approach. As we all know, at the heart of the Musical Futures approach is the bringing about of meaningful music education for our students by teaching the way that they learn, and allowing them to see themselves as being musical as we harness their natural interest in music. It speaks to many objectives of the primary music curriculum, including points 4 and 5 here. In the schools that I have worked with already, there were many cases of both students and teachers realising musical potential that had gone unrealised, which goes to show how Musical Futures is an avenue to purposeful music making in the classroom. To help you better understand the interim findings, I'm going to provide a brief background to my thesis. As I've mentioned, these findings have emerged from the pilot cycle of data collection and analysis, which examines the impact of participatory action research on music teaching and learning regarding the Musical Futures approach. They are drawn from 2 classes to date who participated in the project from September to December of this academic year in the southwest region of the Republic of Ireland. 2 teachers with self-identified strong musical backgrounds engaged in the Musical Futures approach with their classes for their timetabled music education lessons for this period. The participating classes ranged from 3rd to 6th class, which are 9 to 12-year-olds. There was both an urban and a rural school setting in this pilot. Data sources used in this phase of the thesis included a teacher interview conducted before engagement with Musical Futures to gauge the teacher's current musical background and experience, periodic classroom observations of musical lessons. These were recorded for reviewing later. Ongoing reflective notes kept by the teacher on a weekly basis. These were used as a stimulus for discussion when visiting the school and also at the end of the cycle of data collection. At the end of the term, a focus group interview was conducted with a small cohort of the students to gain their impressions of the Musical Futures lessons, and a post-engagement interview was also conducted with the participating teacher. I kept ongoing notes as a researcher participant that included any observations, questions, and any other points of note. And throughout the data collection phase, I was in regular contact via email or phone call if the teacher had any concerns or questions. The interviews and focus groups were transcribed and coded using NVivo. These codes were then categorized and triangulated with the other data sources, and these categories were further grouped into themes, which you will see shortly. Both teachers in the pilot were working from the Everyone Can Play set of resources to teach ukulele to their classes. Since the pilot, Musical Futures Online has been launched, and now teachers are using different strands of the Musical Futures online resources in this project, depending on factors such as the class level and the availability of instruments in the school. Before their participation in the project, all teachers attended a virtual practical workshop that provided an overview of several of the strands, including making music, learn to play, and just play. Upon discussion with the teachers, they decided where and how they envisioned the approach working best for their particular teaching context, and I facilitated this process by providing assistance and support where needed. At present, 2 schools are using the Making Music strand, and the other 3 schools are working from the Learn to Play section, with 2 schools learning the ukulele and 1 school learning the guitar. From the teacher's perspective, engagement in the Musical Futures approach brought about several changes in teacher practice. One emerging finding concerned the concepts of structure and agency. The work of Pierre Bourdieu is useful in articulating how teachers utilised their musical background to inform and support content and pedagogical knowledge and practice. By this, I mean that teachers' musical habitus is a manifestation of the interaction between their accrued capital and their relative position within their field. In other words, the interplay between structural and agental factors was highlighted, whereby the teacher was trying to balance their personal interest in music and musical expression with accountability to external structures such as curriculum and assessment. As Bourdieu states, a conflict between the externalization of the internal and the internalization of the external occurred. You can see this played out from a portion of the teacher transcript. Secondly, the perceived purposes of music education were highlighted. Informal learning exposed the perception of music as product by the teacher. The lesson's intentionality was towards mastery of material, with a focus on playing things right and identifying things that were tricky. Students held a similar mindset of technical mastery, as is demonstrated in the words of a third-class pupil. Returning to my overarching research question, which is, to what extent can informal pedagogies affect beliefs about music education and musical ability? A final interim finding focused on informal learning as a catalyst for ideological interpellation. Interpellation is the moment at which an individual becomes a subject of an ideology. This term was coined by Louis Althusser to describe the operation through which ideology functions in such a way as to transform or recruit individuals as subjects of ideology. Informal learning brought about several interpellative moments and gave teachers an opportunity to reappraise practice which had become static by challenging teachers' ideological positions. One such ideological position that was challenged was the idea of musicality as giftedness, as Macpherson notes in 1997. And the second idea that was challenged was the idea of music as a quasi-elitist art form rooted in Western art music traditions, which one teacher specifically addressed here in their post-engagement interview. Children's musical and extra-musical skills development in the Irish context resonate with those of international studies and the Irish pilot study conducted by Moore in 2019. With regard to musical skills development, enhancements in listening and composing strategies were reported. Students reported heightened self-awareness of areas they wished to improve on. They also had increased choice over curriculum content. One point of note was the differences that emerged in the rate of progress among certain students, with clear gaps appearing between student engagement and skills as the material got increasingly more complex. In terms of extra musical skills development, the Musical Futures lessons were reported to have a calming effect on students. The teachers commented on the development of autonomy and independence of students, while also mentioning improvements in overall listening skills, memory, motivation, engagement, and concentration. As an example, you can see the calming effect of the Musical Futures lessons as identified by a teacher and a student. The COVID-19 pandemic has been an ongoing reality during the data collection phase of the project. As such, incidental data emerge about the musical participation and engagement of students in a socially distant paradigm, which I've categorized here into the relative impact on teachers and students. For teachers, the pace of instruction was affected. This was due to increased student absences and extra time being used helping students to catch up. It was also due to the increased time in the distribution, collection, management, and cleaning of resources such as instruments. For students, physical distancing meant that the tuning of instruments was no longer possible by the teacher. The observed classroom layout was not conducive to peer interactions, and the social dimension of learning and playing together was impacted too. Consequently, opportunities for peer engagement and peer learning were significantly impacted, and group work was relatively non-existent in observations of Musical Futures lessons due to social distancing. Attention was diverted from song singing to other strands of the music curriculum during this time too. Despite these significant barriers to musical participation, the teachers involved were highly enthusiastic and positive about taking on this project and demonstrated great resilience and persistence facilitating meaningful music education for students in such unprecedented circumstances. I'm excited to see this project grow over the coming months, and I'm grateful to the teachers and students for their participation. Finally, I would like to say thanks to you for taking the time to engage with my research. If you have any questions or feedback, I would love for you to get in touch via email. Thank you.